I'll begin again. I'm welcoming you all on behalf of our Climate Declaration, who has organized this webinar this evening, and to indicate that we have co-sponsorship from the Wise Response Society, Engineers for Social Responsibility, and Degrowth Aotearoa, New Zealand. And our topic for tonight is an unusual one for our Climate Declaration, because it's veering straight into the political sphere in terms of the issue of transparency, accountability, corruption, fraud. I think many of us in the activism sphere feel that our voices aren't quite as important or loud as some special interest groups. So we feel that this issue is one of great importance and significance to how we operate as NGOs. And the more knowledgeable we can be in terms of the resources that are available to us already, in terms of regulations and organizations like Transparency International, as well as the kinds of reforms that might be useful for us to support. So that's the reason for what we're doing tonight. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Julie Haggie. Julie is the CEO of Transparency International for New Zealand and has a 20-year history of senior management positions in regulatory, professional.
Hello, John. I don't know if you got my message, but
Okay. Okay, Julie, to start off, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the history of Transparency International, how it was formed and its role in New Zealand.
Yeah, kia ora koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks. It's good to meet everybody here. It's a great crowd. We can only see some of the faces, but I'll flick across and have a look. It's great to see you all. So I'm Executive Director, actually, of Transparency International. I used to be CEO, but I wanted to downgrade and requested it, so I got it. And you don't hear that very often, do you? Well, anyway, and I've been in the role since 2018. Transparency International is a civil society movement. It's a global civil society movement, and has about 100 country chapters. Each are independent organisations, so we're an independent charity and incorporated society in New Zealand. And each chapter has a sort of different structure, but we're all part of the movement and we're all accredited to the movement, and that's quite a strict process to go through in order to be accredited. And the movement itself has some global strategy and global aims, and we all support each other. Our chapters all support each other as much as we can. We've got chapters in countries as diverse as Russia and Ukraine, in Palestine and in Israel, across the South America, in Africa, in Asia, and in the Pacific. And we've got the chapters in the Pacific are largely in the Melanesian countries, the slightly bigger countries, and in Australia and New Zealand. And really, we're about anti-corruption. We are anti-corruption through promoting integrity, transparency, and accountability. So we analyse systems. That's what we do mainly. So while some chapters have a kind of legal advice centre, and a very few might take on cases. I think we've got somebody with their sound on there, and it is a bit distracting. So whoever's got their thing on, if you
just muted them.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, it is just, and so and some chapters do take on cases, but in New Zealand we don't, and most other chapters don't look into individual cases. Instead, we look at the systems of integrity that exist in country, and we try to improve those through promoting, doing advocacy, direct lobbying ourselves, and trying to make changes and educating people as well. So that's kind of what we do. I'll just go. What was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, that's right. Just about this. What do we do? And this is kind of what we do. This is the areas that we're working in: so corruption prevention. There's procurement systems, political integrity systems. We've got a Pacific focus. We're currently doing some work on the Official Information Act. We're trying to move beneficial ownership along, which is about who actually owns companies and limited partnerships and trusts, and more transparency around that. We do a fair bit on public sector integrity, and we've got this national integrity system, which is looking at an overall look at the whole of our systems to try to make sure that we're able to resist and discover and prevent corruption in New Zealand. And we're largely volunteer. We do receive some government funding. We're non-partisan and part of a global movement. When I say largely volunteer, that's our entire board and all of we have members with delegated authority, so it's expert volunteer members. And we are a membership organisation, so please join up. We're really we're always welcoming members, and we have a senior rate as well for those people who are senior, like me. And we we also have interns working voluntarily for us as well. We figured last year that ours were about $800,000 of volunteer hours that we got, and we get a bit of pro bono support from some businesses. So, but we're pretty light. We haven't got an office. We all work virtually, and everybody gives their time. I'm paid, so I'm lucky. What else? What about us? Out about us? Oh yeah.
I think you were saying that a New Zealander was influential in the original establishment.
Yeah, that's right. This guy called Jeremy Pope, way back in the 1990s. He and some other academic friends of his set up Transparency International in Berlin. And they were sort of UK and Berlin, and they set it up from a university. And from there it spread out to universities around the world, including Canterbury University, where in the geology department, where one of the sole representative of Transparency International was for a while. And then later on in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it got going as more of a group that were together and working together. And they did, in 2003, did the first National Integrity System Assessment of New Zealand, and then they did another one in 2013. And in between then, everybody was working on different areas, including support for the Pacific. So we do quite a lot. We support our Pacific chapters, and we also do a bit of research across the Pacific using funding that goes up from MFAT and DFAT and comes back down to us through the TI movement to do work. We're currently doing a piece of work in the Pacific looking at access to environmental information. I'll just go to this one, and it's called Access to Environmental Information. It's going to be released in September, and we're looking at it as a pilot because we only had enough money to do a pilot. But we're hoping to drive some more, because we think the model is really good. We're hoping to get some more money from overseas grant organisations or some other means to be able to run a bigger project next year, and that's looking at what's the access to environmental information in Fiji on fisheries, just looking at fisheries, and in the Solomon Islands, just looking at mining. So really, it's looking at, some of them have got quite good laws. There's not always right to information laws in the Pacific, and that's one issue. But there's also quite a lot of data gathered. But what the researchers, and there's been one in each country, looking at is what quality is it? Can people access the information? Like, for example, environmental impact assessments, can they get them? They often said that they've been done. They probably have been done, but there's no public reporting of that, or very little. And so that's what these people are looking at. What state it's in? Can they easily access it? Is it available online? That kind of thing. And that's that piece of work will come out. And they interviewed local organisations in those countries, and that's going to come out in September. And I think it's going to be quite a good little piece, because people can't hold government to account unless they've actually got the data to do something about it, right? So that's the reason. It might seem a little offside, but we talk about systems, and unless you've got those kind of systems available to people, then they're really not. The journalists and so on are not able to actually really hold power to account. And a lot slips through in that area of obfuscation and opaque systems. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. And we did do another research project about 4 years ago on looking at money laundering across the Pacific and the risks there related, and the corruption and money laundering risks. That's another sort of thing that we've done there. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah.
How serious is that money laundering in New Zealand?
It's Well, the Serious Fraud Office says it's quite large, into the multi-millions. I don't think there's a clear. I don't think that anybody's clearly counting it very much, but if we have a look at, we keep a database of fraud and corruption in New Zealand. It's really only from court cases that have been going on, and over the last 5 years or so, it's just gone digital. Somebody using AI to help us, to help power it up, because it was me having to look every few months through all the newspapers and so on. It's easier if you can get that automated, and that. There's some pretty big money laundering cases have gone through. $55 million one, $27 million another one. So that's the kind of size that people are putting money. But we've got less of the international money laundering that used to occur before New Zealand closed down its foreign trusts arrangements. So they have tightened up considerably. We've still got trusts that are facilitating tax evasion and possibly money laundering, and that's because the only reason I'm saying we probably have is that because there's no register of trusts and very little information on the beneficial ownership of trusts, it's really hard for our investigative agencies and any journalists to actually find out that information. But we do know there's about 50 million, I think, sitting in there from what is alleged to be a fraud based in the Seychelles. Person allegedly ripped off the government there, then split all the money across many trusts all around the world to hide it, and some of it is sitting in a trust in New Zealand, and about $50 million. That happened quite a long time ago, and was revealed through the Panama Papers. That was how it became evident. It's the only way it was found out. So yeah, that's one of our big things, is actually we think you've got to be, we need much more transparency around who owns, who's actually controlling the entities that are set up under our financial systems in New Zealand, whether they're limited partnerships, trusts, or companies. And we don't have that at the moment. It's a real big gap.
Yeah. Well, overall, Julie, what is the status of corruption and fraud in New Zealand, and relative to other countries as well, and the history of it? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better?
Yeah, well, here's the Corruption Perceptions Index, and I don't know if you've heard of this. It comes out every year. We were at the top for years and years. We were number 1 or number 2, and our score was really high. And then we have just started dropping. And it's quite a serious drop. Now we're down to 4th, which still is quite good, still good in terms of 160 countries that are in the CPI. But it doesn't augur well, because it's really hard to get back up, get your score back up. As Australia found after the pork barrelling cases that they had, that their score slumped right down, and then it's really hard to get that back up. And this does matter because companies, because they are the CPI score is one of the scores that affects your credit adjustments, the international sort of assessments of how good you are to do business with. So, but
how is this index arrived at? I mean, it's a perception score index.
As perceptions, that's right.
Whose perception?
Generally, there's 2 sets of the CPI, we're CPI in it, but CPI in New Zealand, but this is the Corruption Perceptions Index, so I'll just call it the CPI because it's easy to say, is put together. The scores come from 13 independent surveys that have nothing to do with Transparency International. So Transparency doesn't score up or down anybody, but there are questions in these 13 well-respected surveys across the world, and they're all open. We can see it all on the Transparency International site, who they are, what they are, and which ones cover New Zealand. There's 8 of those cover New Zealand. And those surveys and assessments are undertaken either by business leaders, or they're undertaken by country assessors. And it's the sort of country assessor that does an assessment and looking at New Zealand from the point of view of trade and so on, giving advice about how it is to trade. And there are questions that they answer on things like, are bribes paid? Is money diverted, easily diverted into the pockets of politicians? do you have to? Do you pay? Do people pay to get procurement, or is it fairly done? Those kind of questions are what forms the questions in the Corruption Perceptions Index for both the business people and the others. So, and then they're all kind of squeezed together by TI in a really scientific way. I have to say it's been double checked, and then that comes out with an score out of 100, and then a ranking. So out of all the countries that are on it. So yeah, that's how it works. And then, so the question is corruption on the rise? And here are the results of, this is just the convictions for corruption. So we've got fraud for sure, and most people who've known someone who've been ripped off online think, you're right, that we've got more of that fraud going on. But we've also got more cases of corruption. That is where an official in government has misused their position, or somebody has bribed a person in an official position to get benefit of some sort. So it's the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. That's really what it is, or for private gain, actually. And so there are two categorizations in law: bribery involving a government official, and a general corruption one. And so you can see it's on the rise, but this indicates these are when convictions have occurred, but usually a corruption case goes back about 4 years from when the actual conviction occurs. So because it takes so long, they're very complex. The Serious Fraud Office takes a long time to investigate and then progress a case. And usually the people involved, there's companies involved, and it's quite a lot of lawyers involved and a lot of work to do to make sure they get it right. And also because we've got systems that aren't sometimes opaque, like beneficial ownership, it can take a long time for these things to be worked through. So, but definitely we've had some very big cases go through around corruption, particularly in the areas I'll just see it going on. This is where there have been prosecutions. The public sector, there looks like a lot, but this is from our fraud and corruption monitor. So this isn't specifically to do with those cases, the convictions you just saw, but this is both fraud and corruption occurring. So I mean serious fraud, not petty fraud. But the public sector doesn't mean they're all public servants. That means that includes a lot of people who are ripping off through COVID. So a lot of those cases come from COVID. So people ripping off the government system, as well as a few government servants being naughty as well. So that's a bit misleading, that public sector one. But there's the other areas where there is fraud and corruption: is finance and investment, property and construction, and then you can see there's a bit in charities, primary industries, those kind of areas. That's not by money, that's just by the numbers. And the types of corruption that we've got, again, we've got the large amount in general dishonesty. We're just working with our monitor at the moment to try to narrow that area, that general dishonesty and fraud, down a bit, because it's sort of been a sort of other, if you like, and it's got too big to be that. But tax fraud and evasion, we look at that as well, just so that because sometimes tax evasion is quite closely connected to types of fraud. And Ponzi has always been a really big one in New Zealand, but at the moment, and it still is, so it comes up every now and then, and it's usually huge. That's the thing about Ponzi's, is usually they've taken a lot of people's money, and then when it crashes, it's an enormous amount lost. And so that's why that's there. Because we have had a problem with Ponzi's. COVID and wage and subsidy, those ones have been going through the courts lately. There's some bribery, first cases, several cases of bribery and secret commissions. That's colluding with others. There's mortgage fraud. Theft against the employer. There's a bit on money laundering, people being done for money laundering there. So that's the kind of immigration and migrant exploitation is in there as well, some cartel conduct. So that's the kind of things we've got. The types of
Julie,
corruption.
is that previous slide, is that an indication of the number of cases that have come, and over what time period? That's over 5 years. That's the number that are in our. That's the number that have been that are counted in our fraud and corruption monitor, and our fraud and corruption monitor doesn't
doesn't cover all cases of fraud, obviously, because it really only covers about 10% of fraud that's occurring, but it covers the main big cases. So it's cases over 100,000. It picks it up.
Thank you. And some of your earlier slides, one that I've seen but you haven't shown.
Oh yeah.
It indicated I think it was your third.
Oh yeah. So this was sort of, can transparency reveal and reduce corruption? That's the kind of, does it work? Is that? And I say, well, yes, it can reveal it for sure. And there's some actual cases here of dodgy behaviour. It's not always corruption, but it's certainly misconduct, or and when these are ones that have been through a review of some sort, and you're seeing some pretty dodgy behaviour, even though it might not have been progressed to a corruption conviction. But I think that what I'm saying is what transparency mechanisms can help. The Official Information Act was what brought out the Saudi sheep deal. It was where there was a huge facilitation payment paid to a Saudi sheikh. The court discovery was and that's another mechanism we've got, what helped reveal the Smith versus Fonterra case, which we would never have known about unless that had happened. We've got guardrail systems like the Electoral Commission and the New Zealand Police, and that was what helped find the New Zealand First and the Jamie Lee Ross issue about there was a Chinese businessman was paying donations secretly through trying to sneak round to get them in to pay both Labour and National. Register of pecuniary interest is useful, and that's what caught out Michael Woods. He had shares in Auckland Airport and didn't put them on the register, and was found out and still didn't put them on the register, and finally he got the off, didn't he? There's procurement transparency. There's been a huge serious fraud office case, and that's because it was revealed during the case that somebody said this is somebody told on them, really, but that was basically because there's a need to have to tell who does what in procurements. There was the Panama Papers, and that's where you get whistleblowers. That's another mechanism to get transparency. Investigative transparency, and the OCCRP, which is a journalist organisation that fights corruption specifically. Very interesting site to go and visit if you want to have a look, because they do some great investigations, including they've just been doing one on a New Zealand trust, which is really really quite interesting reading. There's guardrail organisations like the Auditor General and the Ombudsman, and they people can tell to them, and they can do independent reports, and that's a good mechanism as well. And then there's the beneficial ownership registers, which we don't have, but other countries do. So yes, they can reveal it. Can they reduce it?
Julie, before you get to the reveal,
Yep.
if we just go back to the previous slide, the Auditor General, the ombudsperson, are those available to ordinary citizens? I mean, can anyone make an inquiry about a situation?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. The Auditor General has quite a tight scope around the financial management within government agencies and local government included. So they would look at complaints relating to how finances had been managed. That's why they're called auditor. They might look slightly more broadly at some things, but they don't. Yeah, the Ombudsman has a much wider brief, and they look at where there's been any kind of breach relating to some individual person. So they get flooded with complaints, and they can't do all of them. So they do have a triage process. So yes, I'd say yes. Whilst everybody's got a right to complain to the Ombudsman, not everybody's going to have their complaint heard by the Ombudsman. So the Ombudsman will usually try to put it on to somebody else, or have it, defer it, or sometimes they'll just say we can't do it. But they will try to triage them to see and take on particular cases.
Yeah, so it's a real limitation, actually, in terms of issues that citizens or NGOs might be concerned about.
Yes, I think they could do with more funding, and they have had more funding. Both agencies have had more funding over the years, but certainly the Ombudsman needs more funding. I mean, another one is the Human Rights Commission, where people can make a complaint to them and have it heard as well. But again, they've also got limits on what they can do, and that's about breaches of human rights. So yeah, there's the Independent Police Conduct Authority. There's this, and there's the Inspector Generals of Security Services and an Inspector General of the Defence Force, and there will be an Inspector General. They're talking about an Inspector General for the police. I don't think that's going to happen. And so there are other agencies that also, Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment is also supposed to be a kind of guardrail for the environment.
Yeah. Now, those are all at the national level. What about at the local government level?
Well, local government is not, you can make a complaint to a local government authority. It depends what it is. If you had a complaint against a local government authority about some management of a project that they were involved in, you would go to the Auditor General. Similarly, with the Ombudsman, you'd probably do the same thing. You'd go to the Ombudsman, rather than, there's no local body ombudsman. There's no local body electoral commission, like we have an electoral commission looking at national issues, but there's nothing like that. If you have a problem, if there's a problem with voting. And we did see in the local elections last time, and we had the local elections, that there was a problem happened in Papatoetoe electorate, where votes were stolen out of letterboxes, and then people voted using those voting slips incorrectly all voted for one particular couple of candidates. So that was clearly voter fraud. But there was not really anybody, it's not actually been investigated by anyone. And I think it's a crying shame, and it means, and we should have had a national inquiry about it, really, public inquiry of some sort, because that's very serious. But that shows there's a real gap in an integrity system there. They've got privately employed electoral officers in local government for local body elections, so there really isn't anything to stop somebody ripping off votes, for example, because also it's all done with postal voting, and that's a real problem for New Zealand.
So it's a real resource issue, a resource problem, and financial resources primarily, in terms of being able to follow up on a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, New Zealand Police are very active. We've got a very active police financial integrity unit. The Serious Fraud Office is doing very good work actually at the moment, and doing a lot to do fraud prevention and information for people too, and to bolster systems. But we've had a concern also about the lack of an anti-corruption strategy for New Zealand. There was a time when, I think they've got a little bit more knowledge now, but there was a time when if a minister had been asked what are the main corruption issues in New Zealand, wouldn't have been able to give an answer, because there wasn't any monitoring or measuring going on, or nobody reporting back to him on that. So I think that's still true to a large extent. We've been doing a corruption scan every year, and because nobody else seemed to be doing it, and here we are, a little NGO trying to do that. So we've been berating people about that, and they have started doing a little bit around strategy and monitoring. So it's some improvement there. Yeah.
Your next slide had something.
Oh yeah, that's one. There was sort of, does transparency reduce? Yes, maybe. And what's the success measure? And I suppose if you look at the indicators, do we have bribery in everyday activities? And I mean, I meet up with the chapters in Indonesia and in where else, in Vietnam and other places where bribery is, Fiji, Solomon Islands, where bribery is an everyday occurrence. People are paying it all the time to get something better for their kids, to get something done quicker, or just to try to get in on something. And we don't have that in New Zealand. If you got stopped for speeding and you offered a bribe to the police officer, I think, unless somebody's money had done it, I don't know, but I would imagine I'd get arrested. That would be for me. So we have that no bribe kind of approach in New Zealand, which is good. Doesn't mean that transparency is about that, but there is quite good expectation by the population that we don't have bribery. Ease of licensing, that's like corruption indicators, is how how quickly can you get a license? It's not even, how quickly can you get a license? It's part doing good, being able to, the ease of doing business as well as an indicator of non-corruption, because sometimes they can get tied up with bureaucracy. But the problem with us, the ease of licensing is, yes, we've had reasonably good systems, but they've been outsourced. And now we've had 2 to 3 cases where people have been giving licenses, have been bribed to give licenses to truck drivers in the roads, and that's a really serious issue. And it indicates to me that there's a problem in the system. So NZTA maybe weren't doing their job right. There wasn't enough monitoring going on to look for red flags. They only just got excited about it, started doing some work when the first case became evident, because somebody blew the whistle, and there hadn't been anything known about it up until that point. So I think that indicated a real problem, laziness within the department that was outsourcing its licensing. So that's kind of things sort of we see happening. Yes, you can. We don't have judges getting paid off in New Zealand. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Have we got media actively suppressed? No, but they're not, they're obviously being reduced in their ability to speak out because people don't buy newspapers, and ads are now put through social media who don't pay taxes and that kind of thing. We've got other problems that affect our media. Have we got an agency catching misconduct and following up with consequences? That's a sort of an indicator of whether you are or aren't corrupt. We've got some good guardrails, but as I've just been talking about, some big gaps. Organised crime penetration, that's another problem, isn't a corruption indicator. Well, the question is, are we keeping up? Because transnational organised crime is now getting its deep claws into right across the Pacific, and running fraud centres, which are also involved in all sorts of illicit activities out of Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of very bad stuff going on. Interpol, we're part of our agencies are part of things like Interpol and other organisations that are trying to work together to keep up with it. But since the transnational criminals don't have to follow any rules, whereas the police and that do, sometimes there's a lag between when you're trying to catch up with them. And secrecy to support private gain. And so that's one where corruption indicator is that where people are having a heavy influence on legislation, but there's a lot of secrecy around it, so there's not really a lot of openness. And that is, I think, when we've got a real problem in New Zealand. We've seen a great deal of money go through to political parties, and quite clearly connected, or there are connections between that and what actually been happening in terms of policy. The government would argue that that's just people who support their policies, but there's a great deal of money going in, and that worries people worries us about how fair it is in terms of how it measures up against the individual vote. Because if the vote doesn't matter as much as money that's coming in, then we're in real problems with corruption. So that's,
It's interesting that Greenpeace New Zealand has started an anti-corruption campaign.
Yeah.
And its main target has been funding of political parties.
Yeah.
And trying to encourage reform in that area. One of the things they suggest is a corruption commission, to look at issues as well as government funding for political parties rather than private groups or special interest groups. Are there any places around the world that you're aware of that have these sorts of measures in place, and are they effective?
Yeah, we are well behind the world in any kind of we're ahead in some ways and we're behind in others. So we're well behind, completely behind the world in any lobbying, transparency of lobbying. That's where we're way out. We need to. Australia, Queensland, for example, has real-time declarations. So as soon as the real-time disclosure. So as soon as the donation's been made, it goes public. People can see it. Well, almost as soon as it goes public. And most other countries have a lot more transparency around who's paying what. and when. In
And
terms
New
of
Zealand
donation,
doesn't even require lobbyists to be registered, does it?
no, there's no register of lobbyists, and also your definitions when you get into that have to be really clear. So, what Ireland found was that it's no good just saying third-party lobbyists. You know, those ones who are professional lobbyists. You've got to have it broader than that. Same as Australia's found that too. So those countries that are on their second iteration are now shifting from being third-party lobbyists, that is those particular lobbying firms, to being anybody who's doing lobbying. So we would be counted, and that's fine. We would be counted as a lobbying organisation, and that would be fair enough too. And so, yeah, that's one huge gap that we have got in New Zealand, because what you can do is you can look up, then it allows somebody to look up, okay, who saw who, what, when, who visited that minister on that day, and what was their aim, because that's what you should do when you have declaration of lobbying, is that the person should have to say who they met with, what their aim was specifically, not just generally. And that the minister diaries are hugely general at the moment. But like, for example, Minister Bailey changed his mind on the beneficial ownership, and we did an OIA to try and find out why the shift. And we found out that his officials had no idea that it was going to happen, and they were shocked. He just suddenly announced it wasn't going to happen. So we looked at his ministerial diary as to who he had met with that month before, and found that there were quite people who were quite vocal against beneficial ownership registers, but you couldn't tie it to it unless you actually had the topic. So if they'd had to say they met with Minister Bailey in order to convince him, then at least you could know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with people making representations, but the whole consultation process had been gone through on the beneficial ownership register, and most people had supported them, and it had had business representatives on those consultation groups and all sorts, and it had got right through to the building of it, and of knowing how much was going to be funded and all that sort of stuff, and then it was sliced off in a day. So you just have to think, well, that seems unfair. I think that seems unfair. Yeah.
Julie, in terms of the political parties, how different are they in terms of trying to improve the situation? Are some of them stronger than others, or are they all happy with the way things are?
Well, if you look at, you have to look at measures of what they've done. So it was Labour did bring in some restrictions on donations in the last government, and they made the ministerial diaries open to the public. So that's why you can now find the ministerial diaries online. They also, though, had quite a high use of urgency. The use of urgency to get legislation through. A lot of that was to do with COVID, but it still was on the increase during the years, and this last government's used it extensively. I'm trying to think of other things that have happened. Both governments have done things for and against that, but what we're a bit concerned with this latest government is the use of executive power at will, and some effort to deconstruct things like the right to challenge in court. So that kind of judicial independence element is a real worry. So you've got things that often some things are good, and then some things that are really bad. I mean, the Greens have put up lobbying regulation before, and I'm sure they support it. Opportunity Party say that they're going to support it. I'll be interested to see the portfolios coming out from some of the other parties to see if we're certainly putting pressure on them all parties to try and accept that we need lobbying regulation and some better control over political donations. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Are there any international examples where a political party made reforms in this area a major policy platform?
Happened in Ireland, and that was after the whole country went into a sort of receivership, into a sort of statutory management because their economy went so bad. And then the party that came in did put it at the top of their list, and they got in. And we were talking with the with an expert in Ireland a while back, and it's on our website, on our YouTube channel, although it was run by another organisation, but I can send you the link if you like. But they found that it's actually really improved the whole behaviour around lobbying, and that even the lobbyist companies are saying they can see the reason why they have it now, because it
sounds like it has to get worse before it can get better.
I think that's right. I think that's what usually triggers it. I think that's triggered what happened in Australia after the pork barrowing exercise as well. So I think those things do tend to. I mean, politicians don't generally want to put controls on who they're talking to and who's talking to them, and they all people of power do believe, and I think I've got a lot of admiration for politicians and the time they give, but people in power usually do think that they're making the best decisions, absolutely the best decisions, and they won't always question their own. They don't always like them to be questioned because they think they're just the right ones to make. And so, having conversations about where integrity sits is quite a hard one sometimes at Parliament.
Yeah. Can you say something about the difference between the national level and the regional level in terms of corruption, fraud, just generally how these sort of issues are handled?
I think what we've seen, what has come through the Serious Fraud Office investigations is higher levels of fraud and corruption where they're at one remove from central government, where there's not so many guardrails in place, and where there's quite a close relationship between business and the people in the organisation making decisions. And quite a few of those issues have been involved in infrastructure or procurement exercises where the governance isn't really over the top of the kind of fraud monitoring systems that you need. And so there's big gaps that people slip through. There's conflict of interest. Sometimes there's a fairly lackadaisical attitude towards that conflict of interest. Like I think it was in the Auckland Transport one where they had some fairly lavish dinners being paid for by this company, which actually turned out that were paying bribes as well. But the business thought the NZTA thought it was really good because it wasn't, it was Auckland Transport, sorry, not NZTA. Auckland Transport it seemed to think it was the comment was made that the governance seemed to think that having a really close relationship between the businesses that were doing business with them and them was actually a good thing, and you didn't need to dig too closely into it. And so, they wanted to keep those positive, and actually within that enabled major fraud to occur.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Particularly in terms of the environmental issues, which is of interest, I think, to many of us here. What sort of options do we have to get more attention to the issues that we're trying to deal with?
Yeah, I do think so. There's not been much of there haven't been any sort of big cases like there have been overseas, like where there's been big time obvious payouts, and clear bribes happening within government agencies or directly to ministers. But I think what people need to be talking about a lot is what it means when you had fast track and kind of regulatory loopholes, and what that means in terms of the final impact on the environment, because if you're not considering all of the issues that have to do with all of the issues that are relevant, and if ministers aren't convinced aren't able to have access to that information and aren't able to see it in a way that is fair. And if the select committees aren't given time to consider it and to have good information put to them, and then if there isn't an ability to challenge decisions finally in the court, then you really, and there's laws passed to stop retrospectively to stop challenges happening, then really that is, in most countries, you would think that's going to lead to corruption, or it's on the edges of corruption. So you have to, there must be a balance. Politicians aren't going to do it on their own, because power is intoxicating. People want to have it and they want to use it, and so you have to raise your voices. So the groups have to raise their voices and say it. And I guess that's what Greenpeace is doing, and other organisations are doing. The Health Coalition and other organisations are doing, is saying this isn't good enough. We don't like what's going on at Parliament, and we want to see integrity and transparency and accountability back again, and through these particular mechanisms, and through being able to have proper conversations, proper debate at Parliament, and not at all locked up in coalition agreements, which is not great, I think, because what it resulted in was 50 acts or so going through without even being touched by public participation. So all of that public participation element is also equally part of our democracy, isn't it? And we can lose our democracy. This is sort of partly how you lose your democracy, by letting this sort of thing happen, where power keeps getting concentrated up and up the line. And so we can lose that. It's very precious what we've got in New Zealand. And partly it's our character as well to want to have that. We've got to fight for it, and that's what we're going to have to fight for it, I think. So that's really important, no matter which party, because if Labour comes in, or if Labour coalition comes in, they want to change everything quickly, like National Day. We'll change everything quickly, get rid of everything quickly in 100 days. And we don't want to have that kind of politics. And you've got to have time. You've got to take time to think about how things should be done and have everybody's voice heard.
Are you aware of any attempts by various NGO sectors to collaborate and work together on demanding these reforms? If only a single sector is doing it, it's easy for the governments to sort of ignore it. But if it's a broad coalition of groups, what you're suggesting?
We've been part of a coalition since last year of it's called Level the Playing Field, which is with the Health Coalition and the Helen Clark Foundation and us, and arguing for transparency each from a slightly different angle, but still with the same message. And so we're all pushing on that. So I think there is. I wouldn't say it's sort of across New Zealand. After all, I mean, we're tiny. We've got minimal resources and only the voices that we have. But getting that message out, we put sort of 10 questions that we want to ask parliamentarians and each candidate, and we think that we suggest everybody should be asking candidates, what is their? Don't they think that this is there are some threats to our democracy through this sort of moving of the executive power up to the minister, that use of urgency?
Share those 10 questions with us.
Yep, you can have a look on our website, www.transparency.org.nz. They're there.
From my mind when the question was asked.
Those are things that we could possibly use when we're doing campaigning around the upcoming election.
Sure. And I think you can adapt them for your own area. I mean, some people will put it for health, the health spending and tobacco and that sort of stuff. Other people can put it in the environmental area, where specifically in that stopping corruption and making things more transparent in business deals. But each of those is relevant to the environment as well, or quite a few of them will be anyway. Yeah. So.
Well, that coalition you spoke about, I think it was called the level the playing field.
Yeah, it was.
Is that still seeking members? Is it trying to broaden its appeal?
Yeah, each of those organisations is different, and I think the Health Coalition's not a membership organisation, whereas we are. so we're just three organisations, three NGO organisations that saw a value in working together on this one issue. I mean, I think the Helen Clark Foundation works on a lot of issues, really, and so they joined in at that point in time. But I think we managed to get the conversation going. Yeah, we managed to get the conversation going, and there's been some useful pieces of information done. I mean, Max Rashbrook has done some really great work. Philippa Jasbeck's done some excellent work looking at political donations, for example. What can you do? What should be done about political donations to make sure that the votes have an even chance, your individual vote has an even chance against money, money and influence. So I think there's some good work being done there as well, and I don't know whether there's got one whole movement to try to get it, because I mean we're working across multiple areas, and political integrity is important, but it's one of our areas that we're working on. So I think it's a matter of parliamentarians seeing that this is really important to people, and I think that comes from ordinary people more than anything. I think talking to your local MP and saying, look, the thing that really worries me is how much urgency has been used. We've done some work it's on our website as well, about the use of urgency over the last several parliaments and how it's definitely on the increase, and also the amount of time we looked at the amount of time between when consultation starts and when it finished, and how that's been squeezed by about 12 days on average over the last term. Before then, there was as I said, a lot of urgency used to push things through as well. So we must have a parliament that's working to include people and to have the citizens' voice in it. We have to have that. It's vital. It reminds me of when I was a teacher at school, at secondary school, and every now and then you'd have a teacher-only day, right? And we'd all go have a breathe of a sigh of relief and look at each other with smiles and say, gosh, things work so much better when the kids aren't here. And of course, like it's the point, it is about people. It is about the people and the citizens. So we must make sure we include them. And that's where the work on citizens' assemblies, and I'm sure we're going to get to that, but where something on political donations would be a great topic for a citizens' assembly.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what Greenpeace is proposing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, because it's quite a nuggety area. If you have a look at Max Rashbrook's work, and he did a lot of work and talked to a lot of parliamentarians about it too. Yeah, it's really. I think it's really good. I think it's really good. What that would be a good way of, because it's very. I mean, Anne Tolley, who is a former minister, she's our chair, and she says it's just really hard running an election. It takes a lot of money and you have to have a lot of resources, and that's the reality. And so you can't. So we haven't come to a firm opinion about whether it ought to be. We think it needs to be decided some way, and certainly have a decision on it. But we haven't come to a firm opinion about we must only have individual. Max Rashbrook has suggested a voucher system where everybody gets a bit of money and they can put it to a party, towards a party, and that would be one way of not having government funding so much as that you would fund the citizens and then the citizens would fund government. But there's a lot of people who don't want to have public funding, who don't want to have taxpayers' money paid to political parties either. So you've got quite a range of opinions there as well, and I think that's why it would make a good. That's why it would make a good topic for a citizens' assembly.
Yes, indeed. I'm just conscious of the time you're giving us so much great information, but I want to give our participants here an opportunity to ask questions. So if it's okay with you, Julie, we'll open it up at this point.
Yeah.
To participants, and I'll stop the screen sharing.
Yeah, I'll stop that. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, and if people could use the, put up their hand, either electronically or physically, and I'll try to identify folks in order so that they can put a question to Julie or make a comment.
Jack, Helen has got a question in the chat about tobacco.
Yes, okay, Helen, would you like to put your question to Julie and let all of us hear it?
Yes, going back a bit, when you were talking about bribery, would you have looked at would you consider bribery when tobacco companies lobby the MPs to relax the promotion laws for tobacco and vapes?
Oh, I think it's everybody should lobbying itself is not ever corruption, really, is it? It's not, because everybody should be able to lobby. Otherwise, every single case of anybody talking to anybody and that is corruption, right? So, and lobbying was also, even by business and others, is a valid part of our democracy. And people and ministers have to be open. We're lucky that ministers are open generally to hearing from a range of people. However, when you get specific legislation proposed and written up for a minister, and then there's money that closely follows, what it does is it makes people think about corruption, doesn't it? It makes you think about corruption. It makes me think about corruption. It's not something you could prove. So we won't say it's corruption because it's not something you can actually be in the room with a tape recorder and have it recorded and they say, well, if you do this, then we'll do that. Because they're saying, you should do this. This is really great. This is really fantastic. And we support you so much, generally. It's always really hard to find corruption at a political level because of that matter of influence that everybody's trying to influence. It's much easier to find corruption at the public sector level where they're not supposed to be out and about with, being influenced in that way and having money passed over, right? But at government and that, so that's why people are saying, well, that political donations thing needs to be controlled somehow. That you shouldn't be maybe making a donation if you're trying to get some law changed, and specifically, or that you couldn't say that. Maybe you shouldn't if you've got a contract with government, or maybe if you're a business. That's all those things you have to try to chip away at that. What clearly seems to be a too heavy an influence on a particular person, and the gun lobby and the influence of people over the herds of national interest, which is another crazy piece of legislation that went through with no consultation whatsoever. It's another example. So yeah, I'm not really answering what you say. You're wanting me to say it's corruption? I'm not going to say it's corruption because, but you think about it and I think about it, don't you? And that's what people are doing. And saying you don't like it and that it makes you feel very uncomfortable and that it's not a good thing, I think that's a really good message to give out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Other questions? And Jill, have you got your hand up there?
Yeah.
You can unmute yourself and there you go.
Right. Well, I was shocked and disgusted and convinced that New Zealand was going downhill in the wrong direction when I heard Shane Jones lie like a flatfish on a documentary that was produced by 350.org, I think. He was being interviewed by Jack Tame, and Jack Tame asked him, can you confirm that New Zealand First, or it might have been Shane Jones's own campaign as a candidate, received a political donation of quite a few hundreds of thousands of dollars from a mining company. And Shane Jones confirmed it, with, sort of with a nod. And then Jack Tame asked Shane Jones, do you have any idea what he was hoping to achieve with that political donation? And Shane Jones says, I have no idea whatsoever.
Yeah.
This was sort of in the lead up to fast tracking, and the mining companies'
Yeah.
proposal was fast tracked.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was only the huge effort of people submitting and making. It was the people who really had an impact on that fast track legislation. It was going to be a lot more egregious. It still is egregious, but it was going to be a lot more so. But there was a flood of people saying, this is appalling what you're doing. You must not use your power that way. And from the Attorney General down, Solicitor General down, Attorney General and the Solicitor General, that made them pause and accept at least a few. They were going to make all the decisions. All the decisions were going up to only that panel of the ministers, and basically the ministers had full sign off and everything, and they were the ones who'd put everybody on the list in the first place. And so, there was just they couldn't see the power dynamic that they were producing, and they didn't care about it at that point in time. Rich, I'm sure, as they were flushed with the success and their opportunity, and I think that's how quickly democracy can get shafted. I think that's the problem. We can get, if you get into that kind of power thing, if you see what's happening overseas in other countries as well, you see that shift turning. And the United States, for example, is a very good example of it. So we mustn't have that happening. We mustn't have that happening in New Zealand. It has happened, and it's happened in the past as well. But I think there's a real danger of that kind of behaviour with people just. And I've been in the room with Shane Jones, where he said he believed. So this is what he firmly believed, was that it was his job as a minister to make those decisions. That it wasn't for the job for the unelected public officials to be doing it, that it was solely his responsibility, and he bore that responsibility with the sense of hugeness, so that's where his position is on it, really. Yeah.
Julie, you mentioned the United States, and what's the impact of what's been happening there in terms of breaking down the balance of power between the various levels of government, and the impact that it's had on other leaders? Do you think there's been an impact, and is it traceable?
Yeah, it certainly hasn't had an impact on law worldwide, as they've just recently nobbled the Corporate Transparency Act, which was one of those have a look into who owns these multinational companies, and where are they operating, and how are they operating, how are these American companies operating overseas, and it was basically stopping visibility on American companies operating, and so that is a real problem. But also I think that America's been one of those countries that has set constitutional guardrails and made them really strong, and so for America's leaders to treat them with disdain is not a good message to other countries. It's been responded to differently by many people across the world, I think, but it is also of deep concern, as some of those long-held constitutional kind of underpinnings have come from America, as well as coming from other places like the UK. So I think those two things are a worry, as well as, honestly, the destabilization that it's causing around different parts of the world. I think that's the other issues. We see it in the Pacific, where there's now much more. There's always been a fight for the area, the place, the dominance, the influence. There's been that for a long time, but there's also strong man politics going on in several countries as well. So I think that's certainly a problem happening, and we've got destabilization in Gaza, with Gaza, the Gaza invasion, and then also what's happening is still happening in Ukraine without any kind of resolution to that. So it's not great, Meanwhile, got climate change going on. There's some really interesting research going on by Gillian Greer and Suzanne Snively and some other women who've been what they think about, what their feelings are on climate change, what they believe in climate change. So they've interviewed them individually, and it's all being done anonymously. So they're not going to reveal who says what. But I think they're going to come out with some very interesting information soon. I think it will well be worth taking note of that. Both, they're good women, and be able to get access to at least some of the parties. So yeah, I think think that's coming out in a few weeks' time, and will be really worthwhile having that, and having one of those speak to you about what they found, about what politicians think. Because I think everybody thinks, that this party or that party is against this or for that, but actually I think there's some broad views held across by politicians who know the truth.
Julie, there's a question here from Anna. Anna, would you like to put your question to Julie?
Hello.
Go ahead, Anna.
Kia ora. Hello. Thank you, Julie.
Kia ora.
I was asking if there is current legislation or changes that are being lobbied for, that we should be in support of or aware of to help improve transparency in general.
So if you go to our front page on www.transparency.org.nz, we've got a sort of political campaign thing that says this is what we want to see. There's a lobbying regulation, regulation of lobbyists. There's controls on donations, upper caps on the donations that can be made, more transparency around it, and much more timely notice of who's making donations, because most of them you won't hear about. They're not made public until 6 months after the election's been held. So much more. And then reducing urgency, having some stronger rules around when you're using urgency in Parliament. That means that urgency means when they squeeze the time, they don't have a select committee process, so people can't make submissions, or when they squeeze the amount of time for public submissions, or when they stop other parts. And sometimes for this Parliament and the last Parliament as well, legislation was put in on the same day as it was passed, with nothing in between. Well, we just can't. That's sort of got to stop. So on our front page, but also if you have a look at Greenpeace, I think as Jack was saying, and he was just pointing it out to me, I wasn't aware that they've got a campaign going on as well. So there's plenty of campaigns to support, and to write to politicians and ask them what, both of all sides, I think, because all of them have got to hear it, because there'll be lots of pressure on all the parties to get their policies through, no matter who gets in next. So you've got to make sure that you're saying we don't like this behaviour and we want this behaviour.
Thank you. Joanna, go ahead.
Julie, where will we find that research by Gillian Greer and Susan Snively?
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking to, because I was talking to Gillian Greer the other day, and she said, they were doing this great research and they're hoping it's going to, I think they're doing it on almost zero money, so I should imagine it'll get a bit delayed, but I would think it will definitely be coming out before the election. I think we'll probably highlight it on our certainly highlight it on our social media pages. And I know Suzanne hasn't got her social media, nor Gillian, I think. So I think they might be doing it with maybe the National Council of Women. Might be them, maybe, because she's quite involved in them, or maybe UN Women. So I'd check up National Council of Women, UN Women, and also keep an eye on our page. We have a newsletter that comes out every month, so the start of the month, probably I haven't heard anything yet from them about it, so I'll ask her, I'll email her tomorrow and see whether when they're going to get it, and say there's urgent. People keen to see it. Be keen to see it. I'm keen to see it. Looking forward to it. Yeah. It's great. All over New Zealand, there's these, just to be hopeful, because I go, and we are non-partisan, and I say that we're not non-partisan, but all over New Zealand there are people doing citizen science, and I think it's really great. There are some people doing analyses of each of the candidates and what they're involved in and what they've said lately. There's a place called Open Brief that you can go and have a look at, and that guy's used some quite powerful, I know it's AI and not everybody likes AI, but he's used it to say what they've been saying lately in chat shows and so on. You can track what the person's been talking about, what's in the current kind of zeitgeist, what's sort of floating around today and tomorrow and yesterday, and what they've said in Hansard. So picking up these things about what their narrative is like, no matter which party they come from. So I think that's an interesting, and also looks at their donations and their pecuniary interests and all those elements of the politicians. And you can have a look and see what's my MP doing, what they like, and then maybe ask some questions. I see you said this. What does that mean? I think that's a good. I really am heartened much by citizen science efforts, and there's lots of them trying to do the same thing as everybody's releasing the power of Claude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie, you mentioned, United States and how things are going in the absolute wrong direction there. What about the other end of the continuum? Are there any jurisdictions that have exemplary regulations and practices in this regard that can serve as a model?
Yeah. And in lobbying, let's just take them. Ireland, Canada. Canada is now in its third iteration. And the UK is not too bad, although they're just having a huge overhaul at the moment because they've still found there's a lot of big holes in there. And actually, they're probably not the best one. Estonia has got some good European ones that have got going. Not Germany, because Germany's into secrecy big time. I'm trying to think of some of the others. We did an analysis of which countries and I can't remember it now. We did an analysis looking at all the different jurisdictions and which countries have been doing good things and which haven't. But we had Chris Finlayson. We were on this, and it was the Helen Clark Foundation who ran this webinar month before last, and Chris Finlayson, he was former Attorney General, and interviewed one from Australia, a sort of agency from Australia, an expert from Australia, from Ireland, and from, where was the other one from? Maybe two from Australia, and talked about what it was like, what the types of lobbying regulation they had, and it's really informative about what's happening in other countries. So that one of them talked about that, so that would be worthwhile finding as well and having a look at. It's be available online on the Health Coalition Aotearoa's site, I think. Definitely a very good one to look at. So yeah, there are good things happening in other countries. We're hugely behind in lobbying regulation, but we're slightly ahead in some areas of political donations transparency. And we're ahead. Like, there'll be a lot of countries that'll be hugely jealous of the fact that we've got ministerial diaries available online. Many countries when I've talked to them, their mouths drop open. There's, chapters in other countries that go, "Oh my God, we couldn't possibly get that." But what's happened to our ministerial diaries is they've got skimpier and skimpier until they almost say nothing at all. So that we still have them, but it's a slim resource. So, and also the other big problem about us is their timeliness. We're just not getting it in time to make a decision and form the vote. That's the problem with our political donations. And there's no caps. And there's many problems with it. But we've put all that on our website. You can go and have a look at it. There's lots of issues that need fixing. No matter what you do, I think parties will try and find a way to squeeze through. Third-party donations, that's a big issue. There's a thing called secrecy donations where you can pay the money, where a donor can pay the money to the Electoral Commission and it goes through. And that particular pot was only meant to deal with particular issues, and now it's got bigger and bigger until it's large, And it's got a cap of 60,000, but it's right up to 60,000 now. So people are still trying to get it without anybody knowing that they're making a donation. And I don't think that's fair. I think if you're making a donation to a political party, everybody's name should be there.
Yeah. Julie, what's your view on the role that deliberative democracy methodologies can play in helping with this systemic problem?
Yeah, I sort of watched deliberative democracy. I know, there's the groups in New Zealand who promote it as well, and we listen to the guy from the UK, I think he is, recently, and I think it's really good, really good option. I think that It's been hard to get traction at a national level for that kind of thing. Like local government has taken it up in various ways and done some quite interesting things around, like Dunedin did one on water management or something. And I think there's a lot of potential for it. I think certainly it'd be great to have it on some national issue. But unless you get a champion, and it has to be a top leader champion, a cabinet minister who's actually saying, I want to try this. One of the best ways to get it, one of the best mechanisms might be the Open Government Partnership, which is New Zealand's still a member of the Open Government Partnership. And it's deliberately trying to have ways and means where the citizens can work with government on issues around transparency. And I think we've been arguing for some time to have some form of deliberative democracy on a policy issue. But the government agencies are very shy of that. They say, no, that's not how it works. We have to run it. It's not how it works. And I think that's a big problem to get over too, is you're going to need Ministry of Justice, I think Ministry of Justice to be a champion. So you need a champion at a government agency, and you need a champion in Parliament to actually take the step and say, yes, this would make a really good topic for a piece. And I mean, mostly where they've been done around the world at a national level, they've never, governments have never said, oh, we'll absolutely put this in place. They've said, it will be recommendations, right? We will take them strongly, but it will be recommendations. But it's still a great exercise to do. The other thing is that most government agencies, they say, oh, well, we just haven't got the money to do something like that because it costs so much. And yes, it would cost. It would be hugely worthwhile, of course. Yeah.
Can you say something more about the Open Government Partnership? What is that?
It's an international mechanism. And a lot of governments have signed up to the Open Government Partnership model, and New Zealand signed up. And under that, you undertake to work together with civil society on issues that civil society put forward. You come out with a set of commitments. So, for example, the ministerial diaries, the opening of ministerial diaries was a commitment under one of the national action plans of the Open Government Partnership for New Zealand. That's why we've got ministerial diaries. Beneficial ownership was on there but got dropped. Lobbying, we've tried to get it on several times onto the Open Government Partnership list, onto the commitments, but it hasn't been. But at the moment, so what happens is that there's a committee there's a group of, they call it a multi-stakeholder forum, which is made up of a whole group of people who can be part of it, who've got time and their resources to sit there and come to meetings and have conversations and make suggestions and sift through public consultation on it and come up with a set of commitments that the government be led by a minister. So that has to have a minister for open government, and current minister for open government is Nicola Willis. So you have to have a committed minister as well. Chris Hipkins was the previous minister. He just didn't have time to put to it. So it didn't get a lot of traction at that upper level. So I think that what you do need is that minister really connected and really committed. It's a great sort of model. You have a look at it online. It's an interesting model, and some countries are doing really good and innovative things. But for us, it's kind of got a bit stymied because in the end, nobody was willing to do anything new, and it's ended up being kind of work that they could do with under their current brief, and they were, was kind of dumbed down a fair bit, really. So yeah, that's kind of, have I explained what it is? It's kind of like a commitment where you have
that's helpful. Thank you. I hadn't
together,
heard of it before, so it's useful to know about things like that. Yeah. So in terms of groups like the ones that are sponsoring this event this evening,
and
the people involved, it sounds like the most useful thing we can do is talk to politicians who are either in office or are running for office and get them to commit to some systemic changes in this area, not just window dressing. But it would seem to have to be a multi-year kind of cross-party approach to have a real kind of systemic impact that seems to be required, because otherwise just the level of complexity and the details are such that if it isn't handled as a systemic problem, it's never going to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. And most of those ones, those integrity elements can stick. It's harder for a minister to overturn something that's directly about transparency. They don't ever want to. The current government did shift the donations one up a bit, but the threshold up a little bit, snuck it up a little bit, but they still didn't make a huge changes to to revert any of those. It's quite hard for them to do it once. So once you get an integrity shift piece in place, it's quite hard for a minister to just overturn it on no basis. So I think that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah. Well, this has been extremely helpful. I've certainly learned a lot. And it's even scarier than I thought.
Oh no, there's lots of good stuff happening around. You should see a Papua New Guinea chapter. All right, I mean they are just the beast. They're the best in the Pacific. They are doing amazing things. They have people walking for integrity. They have children's political sort of democracy camps. In a country which is beset by corruption, there are people doing amazing stuff, and you see that across the world. So we've got to have faith, and a lot of young people are really involved as well. So you've got to have faith in people. We are, we've all got to make sure we put our heads above the parapet and demand better. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for those reminders of the good things that are happening. It is important, and important to learn from as well. Yeah. So any sort of first of all, from the participants, are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to make?
I'd like to thank Julie and her organization. I mean, this is not a formal thanks, but just from me. I think what you're doing is fantastic and hugely needed, and also very creative.
Well, please join us. We always do with members. It's what gives us some sort of mandate, really. It's always off our website and stuff. So please, join up and just say, yep, we support it, what you're doing.
Yeah, well, individual actions can make a difference. So, we're hoping that people will take some time and put some effort into talking to their politicians and the people running, and people that are looking for your vote are the ones to talk to.
Yeah, that's right. It's definitely, yeah.
So
Julie,
any final comments or words of advice, Julie, that you'd like to leave with us?
Somebody else was asking something. Who was somebody
Oh,
else?
yes, I was just saying, Julie, I'd like to tell Toko what Joanna said. It's been a wonderful presentation. I'm not into promoting a certain party, but I have just popped something in the chat about deliberative democracy, and I'm very grateful for you promoting it and all the other things that you're trying to do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Trust democracy.
Okay, well, this has been terrific, Julie. Thank you very much for your time tonight and all the other important work that you do day in and day out, and I'm sure night in and night out as well.
Night in and night out. Yeah, that's right. Every night this week. Trust democracy. If you haven't talked to them, have you talked to them? Trust democracy.
Yeah, we have
I have. Very
good
helpful.
value. They're good value.
Yeah, we actually have a webinar scheduled with Simon Wright.
Oh yeah, Simon.
At
Yeah,
the end
no,
of the
well,
month.
yeah.
So
He's good
we'll be
value.
picking up on some of these additional issues later in the month.
Yeah, I've been sitting in consultations with Simon, and certainly he was involved in the Open Government Partnership, and he's really passionate about it. There's some good things happening in that area. I think he was the one who they brought out a guy. I can't remember his name, but they brought out this guy.
Ian.
Ian Reid, something
Walker. Ian Walker.
Ian Walker, that's right. And he was fantastic talking, and he's done it all over the world, deliberative democracy. So there was a really good webinar that they did several really good webinars. Ian, he went around New Zealand with them. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Julie, and all good wishes for the important work you're doing. And thanks again for helping us understand the state of play in New Zealand and in terms of this very important area. And I hope the information that you've given us will inspire people to take some action with their political contacts, and especially with the upcoming election, and see what we can do to make it an issue.
Very good.
Great.
Good luck with you all, and yeah, have a good evening.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your participation, and we'll look forward to you joining us. I think the 26th is when Simon Wright will be speaking about deliberative democracy methodologies and what's going on here in New Zealand in that space. So we hope you join us and tell your friends. Okay. Good night, all. Thanks again.
Good night.
Bye-bye.